Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of Battle Cry here on India Today with me, Shiv Arur, the only show on television that gets you up close with India's warfighters, weapons and how this country protects itself. This episode comes to you just hours after Aero India has wrapped up, and what a show it's been. We've broken every big story from the show and we've distilled it all down for you in this special episode of Battle Cry. It's the biggest blockbuster decision that supports indigenous manufacture, design, development and procurement of Indian fighter jets. Remember, through its entire history since independence, India has been totally dependent on foreign suppliers for fighter aircraft. All that's going to change come February 2024. Here's this big exclusive by India Today's Akshay Dongre. Ripping up the skies over India's aerospace capital, fighters from India and the world in a deadly aerial dance. But amidst all the sound and fury that only a jet engine can exude, there's a thundering new dawn rising for the Indian Air Force. One that seeks to take decades of legacy dependence on outside fighter tech and replace it with India's own. India Today has learned that this ambitious drive is being informally called Mission 470. And the reason for that, in case you hadn't guessed, is that starting February next year, the Indian Air Force will begin receiving the first of 470 fighters designed and built right here in India. Let's take you step by step through this big plan. Things will kick off in February 2024 with the delivery of the first of 83 LCA Tejas Mark 1A fighters, a hugely improved version of the current Tejas in service. Meanwhile, the Indian Air Force will also begin to order 108 LCA Mark 2 jets, aircraft that are derived from the original Tejas but enormously more capable, with better performance, stronger engines and far superior capabilities. You're familiar with the LCA Tejas, but this is the Mark II and it's actually a vastly different aircraft. It's actually a bigger aircraft. This scale model tells you a little bit about how that final look is going to be. Some big differences. It's a heavier, longer aircraft. As you can see, it has these canard foreplanes here for greater maneuverability. It actually increases the agility of this fighter. If you look at the weapon systems on board the LCA Mark II, it can actually carry a much larger range and more weapons than the LCA can. Very, very importantly, if you come to the back, you can't really see it here in the model, but the engine that goes on the LCA Mark II is going to be a much more powerful engine on the existing LCA Tejas of the Indian Air Force. While this happens over a decade, India's most advanced fighter in development, the 5th generation stealthy AMCA, will come online and begin deliveries of at least 126 units to the Indian Air Force. On a parallel track, the Indian Navy will also begin receiving 100 twin-engine deck-based fighters or TED-BF for its aircraft carriers, fully purpose-built naval jets to meet the Indian Navy's future requirements. Well into the next decade, that translates into 470 Indian-designed, Indian-built fighters for the Indian Air Force and Indian Navy. With Defence Minister Rajnath Singh declaring that 3/4 of India's present and future weapon modernization budgets will be reserved for Indian industry, the future looks bright. But nothing is ever as simple as it looks. As India sets down a path towards Atmanirbhar fighters, can it remain steadfastly on track? Bureau Report, India Today. So basically, there can be no bigger act of affirmation and validation that India is on the right path to self-reliance. Solidarity with Indian-made fighters, not as a favor, but in recognition that these are fighters every bit as good as those that we are importing and have been importing for so many decades together. Mission 470 is basically starting in February 2024 and will go on for many, many years to bring in these Indian-made fighters into the Indian Air Force. Take a look at what Mission 470 actually looks like, the composition of it. It's going to start with 83 LCA Tejas Mark 1A fighters, with an addition for 50 more we're hearing that the Indian Air Force will put up for, by way of orders. This will be in that first phase. Then you will have 108 LCA Mark 2 fighters, and these are very significantly different jets. They're bigger, they're more capable, stronger engine, more weapons, better cockpit and avionics and radar, etc. So 108 of those. 126 of India's most ambitious fighter program, which is the AMCA, which is a 5th generation stealth fighter program. So 126 of these will also be ordered. 100 naval fighters. India, it's not only the Indian Air Force that's going to benefit from Mission 470, at least 100 twin-engine deck-based fighter, that's what TEDBF stands for, will also be ordered. If you add all of these together, it makes up 470. So that's why it's called Mission 470. For the next decade and beyond, all of these Indian-made fighters will join the Indian Armed Forces. Now, in case you're wondering why Mission 470 is such a big deal, of course I told you that India has always been dependent on imports, but let me just get into the meat of it. The reason why this is more than just a headline. This is hugely significant. Reason number one, India and the Indian Air Force's fleet is overwhelmingly composed of foreign fighters. Fighters that we've either bought from abroad or we only license build here in India. Reason number two, of the 31 fighter squadrons that the Indian Air Force currently operates, just 2 of those squadrons are Tejas fighters. That is, aircraft that are designed, developed and manufactured here in India. Everything else is either bought from abroad or is of foreign origin. Reason number 3, it will solve the Indian Air Force's chronic and continuing problem with spare parts and maintenance, because every time something goes wrong with fighters in terms of parts, more often than not, India needs to look abroad for assistance from the original equipment manufacturer. Things are better now, but they're still not completely resolved. Finally, an Indian Air Force fighter fleet for India and 100% by India has huge benefits in terms of our own strategic autonomy. Nobody can dictate to us how these aircraft need to be used, where they're going to be used, etc. And remember, the very key issue here also is when you make credible fighters, those fighters can compete in the global market and win competitions abroad, and India can become an exporter of fighter aircraft, basically totally reversing the role that it has played for the last many decades. India could also become a low-cost manufacturing hub of aircraft. Remember, once India reaches that level, manufactures cutting-edge fighter aircraft here, other countries that manufacture cutting-edge fighter aircraft will not be able to compete. They'll want to outsource that work to India because India can make those things much cheaper and at a better rate. It will create lakhs of unskilled, skilled and super skilled jobs, from welding to metallurgical workers to software to flight control computer engineers. All manner of skilled labor will be there in terms of employment generation thanks to Mission 470. Now, the other reason why Mission 470 really shines and is so significant, like I said, is because a lion's share of the Indian Air Force's combat aircraft fleet is of foreign origin or bought directly from abroad. Just take a look at our fleet. Many of these aircraft are totally familiar. You've got the MiG-21, which is still in service, mind you, which is from the Soviet Union, which is Russia. Then you've got aircraft like the MiG-29, also of Russian origin. You've got aircraft like the Mirage 2000s, venerable, beloved aircraft. They participated in Balakot. They are of French origin. India had the chance of manufacturing them here, but missed that bus. You've got the Rafales, which is the big brother of the Mirage, also of French origin, supplied directly from France. You've got the Sukhoi 30. India happens to be the largest operator of Sukhoi 30 fighters. These are built by HAL in Maharashtra, but they are not Indian aircraft by any stretch of imagination. These are also Russian fighters. We've got Sepicat fighter bombers, which are Anglo-French aircraft. They've been supplied from there. They're also built under license by HAL, but not of any Indian technology. And finally, you've got the Tejas, which is an Indian aircraft. But there are very many big questions to be asked. Mission 470 sounds very good, but there are serious questions to ask, and the path is not going to be easy. Question number one that we're asking, what if HAL and the Defense Research and Development Organization do not deliver on all these fighter aircraft programs on time? Because time is of essence, it's absolutely critical. If these aircraft don't come on time, the Indian Air Force will say, we don't have anything, we'll have to import fighters. What if HAL and DRDO do not meet the Air Force's technical requirements? What if these aircraft are not good enough for the Air Force? That's also a real possibility. But will the Indian Air Force, on its part, put its money where its mouth is for these Desi programs? Surely they should be willing to expend a little extra energy on something that is Indian because of the huge benefits of having fully indigenous programs. Will this extra energy be spent to support Indian fighter aircraft is the million or billion-dollar question, mind you, that will be asked at this point of time. And the Air Force will be looked at very, very closely. There are many, many different pitfalls on this road. Can Indian jet programs be derailed by foreign firms? It has happened in the past, where foreign vested interests, because of the threat to their own market share, their own contests in India, could do things to try and derail Indian programs. It's not something that is unknown. Can the government ensure an end to Babugiri and ensure deadlines for these Indian programs so that they are completely professionalized with mutual respect between the laboratories and the armed forces, so that there is an absolutely mutual meeting of minds and a professionalism in terms of timely delivery? These are the big questions that need to be asked. If all of them fly, Mission 470 will be a success. And the officer at India's Air Force headquarters, who is tasked with procurements and planning and how to get new aircraft, spoke to India Today's Akshay Dongre, where he tells you specifically about the Indian Air Force's modernization plans. Listen very carefully. This is a big news break.
फ्यूचर जो हमारे एयरक्राफ्ट हैं, हेलीकॉप्टर, उस पर क्या किस तरह का जोर वायुसेना का रहेगा?
जोर तो रहेगा हमारे 5th जनरेशन और 6th जनरेशन टेक्नोलॉजीज पे, ताकि चाहे हमका हो या चाहे मॉडर्न जनरेशन कोई भी मैन अनमैन टीमिंग जहाज होगा, तो उसमें जो टेक्नोलॉजीज शामिल होंगे, हम यही चाहते हैं कि ये 5th to 6th जनरेशन टेक्नोलॉजीज उसमें शामिल हों।
और अगर हम एलसीए की बात करें, तो आपको लगता है कि एलसीए हमारे जो मिग सीरीज के जहाज हैं उसको रिप्लेस करने की दिशा में तेजी से उस पर काम हो रहा है?
बिल्कुल हो रहा है। जैसे ही ये 83 एलसीए मार्क 1A का कॉन्ट्रैक्ट जो फुलफिलमेंट शुरू होगा अगले साल से, तब हमें उम्मीद है कि आने वाले सालों में 3 या 4 स्क्वाड्रन एलसीए के आएंगे और उसी दौरान मिग 21 फेज आउट हो जाएंगे, तो 1-to-1 रिप्लेसमेंट हो जाएगा।
प्रधानमंत्री ने कहा कि भारत अब रक्षा के क्षेत्र में, हथियार के क्षेत्र में एक बड़ी ताकत के तौर पर उभर रहा है। इस वक्त जो देश और दुनिया के हालात हैं, हम देख रहे हैं रूस यूक्रेन युद्ध, किस तरह से आप देख रहे हैं? क्या हमारे जो वेपन हैं स्वदेशी, उनसे हम भविष्य की लड़ाई लड़ने की दिशा में कैसे आगे बढ़ेंगे?
इसमें कोई शक नहीं है कि आने वाले सालों में हमें कंप्लीटली आत्मनिर्भर रहना पड़ेगा, हथियारों में और एयरक्राफ्ट में भी। तो इसको मद्देनजर रखते हुए जिस दिशा में हम चल रहे हैं, बिल्कुल सही चल रहे हैं, और हमें उम्मीद है कि आने वाले दशक में लगभग 70% हमारे हथियार मेड इन इंडिया रहेंगे।
An exclusive India Today report. After 3 years of evaluations and months after the Rafale completed delivery of 36 fighters to the Indian Air Force, it looks like the Rafale is in a #1 front-runner position to win an Indian Navy deal for 26 fighters. Unlike the Indian Air Force fighters, these fighters will operate off the INS Vikrant aircraft carrier. Here's our exclusive report. The French Rafale blasting off from its mothership. And America's top gun, the Super Hornet, departing America's iconic supercarriers. Currently, two of the world's most battle-proven naval fighters, the Rafale and Super Hornet, have spent the last few years competing for a lucrative Indian Navy contract. A contract for 26 fighters to make up the fighter wing on board India's first indigenous aircraft carrier, INS Vikrant.
And now, a year after compatibility trials of both aircraft at the INS Hansa Naval Base in Goa, a prospective front-runner has emerged. Top sources tell India Today that the Rafale has edged out the Super Hornet in the contest, with the Indian Navy formally informing the Defence Ministry that the French Rafale is more suitable for its requirements. The Ministry of Defence and both companies, Dassault Aviation and Boeing, remain tight-lipped on developments since no formal communication has been made yet. Those sources confirm that the Indian Navy has made its choice and the ball is now in the government's court. A contract award would make the Indian Navy the first export customer of the naval carrier-based Rafale M, having already exported the Air Force variant to a slew of countries including Egypt, Qatar, Greece and of course India, which operates 36 Rafale fighters. The Indian Air Force's Rafales, populating 2 squadrons, arrived in India between 2020 and 2022. The same Rafale variant is a contender in the Indian Air Force's multi-role fighter aircraft contest that seeks to buy and build 114 fighters. In the Air Force contest, the Rafale goes up against a large stack of contenders, including the Eurofighter Typhoon, F-21, Gripen E, MiG-35, Su-35 and F-15 Eagle II. INS Vikrant, the Indian Navy's first indigenously built aircraft carrier, entered service last September and recently began its crucial aviation tests months ahead of schedule with landing and takeoff cycles of the homegrown LCA Navy and the staple carrier-based fighter, the MiG-29K. The Indian Navy formally sidestepped the LCA Navy as a fully operational carrier fighter a few years ago, choosing to task it with tech demonstrator duties towards a purpose-built naval fleet defense fighter. That future product, as we've reported here on Battle Cry, is the twin-engine deck-based fighter, which is all set for cabinet-level project sanction from the Indian government this year. Reports suggest the Indian Navy is looking to support a campaign for 100 of these new jets when proven and ready. If Dassault Aviation manages to close this deal for 26 Rafales, it'll be a stopgap acquisition to give the Indian Navy carrier-based jets to bridge the gap until the TED-BF comes online in the next decade. The first flight of the new Indian fighter could be as early as 2026. Indian defense procurements often take a meandering and unpredictable flight path, and no one can tell for sure where things will actually land. But for now, the Rafale once again has the upper hand. Bureau Report, India Today.
By far the biggest eye-catcher at Aero India, well, arguably speaking certainly, was the F-35 Lightning II. It's America's latest fighter. It's the most expensive fighter development program in history, but boy, what a beautiful piece of machinery it is. 2 F-35 Lightning IIs landed in Yelahanka, sending aviation buffs into absolute ecstasy. I was there to catch the aircraft as well. Take a look.
A lone F-35 fighter aircraft roaring through the skies over the Yelahanka Air Base in Bengaluru. The star attraction at the Aero India show. The stealth fighter jet performing stunts. The 5th generation fighter jet is the most modern machine. Its stealth, advanced sensors, information fusion and network connectivity, all packaged within in a supersonic, long-range, highly maneuverable fighter makes it a deadly jet. Adding to the combat capabilities, its ability to analyze and share data makes it a force multiplier. It can carry up to 18,000 pounds of ordnance. Its stealth features allows it to go undetected. Advanced sensor fusion adds to the aircraft's awareness making it more lethal.
These are the F-35 Lightning II. They're fifth-generation fighter aircraft and the latest fighters to be developed by the United States. They're in service with the United States, but you're wondering, what the hell are these two aircraft doing here at Aero India? Let me first tell you that the F-35 is making its debut here in India. These aircraft have never been in Indian airspace, certainly never on Indian soil.
2 aircraft flew to India for the air show. One is on static display and the other was party of an enthralling flying demonstration. The timing of its maiden appearance in India is interesting. Does this mean US wants to pitch the F-35 for the Indian Air Force? India is planning its own 5th generation aircraft, the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft or AMCA, but that will take time. F-35's participation has led to murmurs about the possibility of US making a strong pitch to India. This also coincides with Indian Navy finalizing between the French Rafale and the US's FA-18A Super Hornet. With Shivarur, Akshay Dongre and Manjeet Negi. Bureau Report, India Today.
And if the F-35s hadn't created enough of an aviation frenzy at Aero India, give it to a pair of B-1B Lancer, supersonic bombers of the US Air Force, to sweep in and capture every eyeball. Incredible scenes. Watch this report.
A truly scintillating display of one of the world's most beloved and iconic aircraft. The crowds in Bengaluru were in ecstasy as these 2 American B-1B Lancer supersonic heavy bombers roared into the Aero India show. Lovingly called the Bone, these strategic jets first flew nearly half a century ago and remain part of the formidable and far-reaching US bomber fleet. Once a platform for nuclear delivery, the super sleek jets now wield conventional weaponry of every kind, including air-launched cruise missiles. But why are B-1B Lancers flexing muscle in India, you're wondering? Before you wonder if India is thinking of getting its own bombers, the answer is no. India has no such plans. But the jets buzzing Bengaluru are most definitely an act of strategic messaging to the region, most definitely to China as well. As India and the United States forge closer military ties and bilateral relations, the US is making it clear that it stands with India to keep the peace in this hemisphere. American messaging is seldom subtle, and with a pair of bones in the air, this is pretty typical of how the US Air Force does things. The US bombers flew into India in the wake of a pair of F-35 Lightning II fighters that have already captured massive eyeballs and mind space at the ongoing Aero India show. As India Today has reported, these jets too are here not for a sales pitch, but as a reminder to India and the world that the US controls the best weapons technology on Earth. 2 iconic jets, one a late Cold War era beast that's still bristling with bombs, the other a stealthy little jet that has set the standard for future fighters and combat, signaling, thy name is America. Bureau Report, India Today.
Thanks for watching this special episode of Battle Cry. For all the news and updates, keep watching India Today.